August 9th is the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples, a day to raise awareness of the rights of Indigenous people and communities. The Education Law Advocacy Project team with SMIRLS wants to draw attention to the educational rights of Indigenous students today. Indigenous students in Minnesota have the same rights to public education as all other students. Nationally and in Minnesota, laws have been implemented which focus on the educational outcomes for Indigenous students. The Federal American Indian Education Act of 1972 led to the creation of the Office of American Indian Education, which emphasizes teaching Native cultures, traditions, and languages in schools. The 2015 U.S. Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, allows educational stakeholders to weigh in on what is taught. ESSA requires that tribal consultations take place between tribes and schools to foster greater collaboration. Minnesota's American Indian Education Act took effect in 1988. Through this act, the American education programs were added to provide voluntary programs in public elementary and secondary schools, tribal, charter, and alternative schools to support post-secondary preparation and academic achievement of Indigenous students, to make the curriculum relevant to the needs and cultural heritage of Indigenous children, and to develop intercultural awareness among all students, parents, and staff in the schools. And this act details a teacher licensing process for American Indian education. Additionally, Minnesota's American Indian Education Act requires that Minnesota school districts with 10 or more Indigenous students have an American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, or AIPAC. This group is tasked with making recommendations about curriculum and the educational needs of Indigenous children enrolled in the school or program. Here in Minnesota, achievement gaps for Indigenous youth are widening. Minnesota statutes require that the Minnesota Department of Education has a strategic plan for American education that reflects 5 goals: to increase American Indian student involvement, to increase the number of Indigenous teachers in public schools, to close the achievement gap between Indigenous students and their more advantaged peers, to increase the statewide graduation rate for Indigenous students, and to increase Indigenous student placement in post-secondary programs and in the workforce. Upholding the educational rights of Indigenous students is critical to the success of our students and the state. Please join ELAP in recognizing the educational rights of Indigenous Minnesotans by sharing this video or relevant resources that are linked in the comment section below on your social media. Thank you.